encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network. If you want to be a serious Bible student, a successful servant, and a powerful preacher, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome to Preachers in Training. My name is Robert Hatfield, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things preaching and ministry. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing social media and how we can minister on social media. And we're going to be talking nuts and bolts with this. We're sort of looking at the practical approach. I think for a lot of preachers, this is one of those things. It's like, I feel like I need to be doing this these days. I'm not really sure how to get going with it. I want it to be the best it possibly can be. We're talking tips and tricks and tools and just the nuts and bolts of all this stuff today. And helping us discuss all of this is Paddy Flanagan, who preaches for the Owens Crossroads Church of Christ in Owens Crossroads, Alabama, Huntsville area, right? Welcome,
Yes,
man.
sir.
It's good to see you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Robert. This is exciting.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. Looking forward to the conversation. Tell us about the Owens Crossroads congregation before we get too much into the topic of the day. How are things going out there?
So this is a great little congregation. I like to call us a big little country church. And let me explain. It's a congregation that's been a part of the community for, I think it's 113 years coming up on about this point. And so it's not new to the area, but the area, for those of you who know North Alabama and especially Huntsville, this area has really exploded over the past 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so what started as just a little farm country church has continued to grow with the community and just be a big beacon out here. And about 5 years ago, they built the building that we're in now and did a lot of forward thinking. The leadership, before I came, I was still at Concord Road at the time, but they did some good forward thinking and put us in a great physical location so people can see us. And it's not just that, as we'll continue to talk about, you probably, that we still just keep doing what we need to be doing here. And so let's see, it's a great congregation. I was trying to think, we have lots of different generations. We have different personality types, not just one type of person or one type of group here. It's a really good mix of both people who've lived in this area for 4 generations and people who just moved from different states. And so you get that different feel too, which is probably one of the more interesting things, when you've got people from California moving in and then someone who's got a farm across the street moving in, your rocket scientists, your welders, all those things kind of coming together. And it's just a wonderful place.
Beautiful building, like you mentioned a minute ago. And if you're watching the video version, I sort of have it pulled up here, and the sunset behind it and the nice little mountain that's back in there. I mean, it's nice. It's nice.
It's really super cute. It's not the biggest or fanciest building, but it shows that we're not, everything's not behind us, that we're still working in the present, and it's a nice
that's
location.
right.
I'm not complaining,
Good stuff. I was thinking about guys who are active in ministering on social media. And, I think that can take a variety of forms, right? I know some people who sort of keep their social media presence basically on their own personal page. I know other men who basically interact all the time as the congregation. And so they post things there. And then I know guys that kind of take the approach like I think you do. And I try and do, although somebody told me recently, you only really ever post church stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's true. But, you kind of have your personal page where you're you, and then you have the church page that sort of represents the congregation. And, I guess any of the above are good ways to do it. I think today we're going to talk about maybe how to best represent the congregation on social media. I think that's sort of the direction that we're going to look into and sort of figure out a little bit of this. I think it can be a daunting task, but the assumption that we're both coming into with this is it's an important thing to consider, and especially in the age of the present. So you want to talk just a little bit about that as we get going? I mean, social media, I don't want to make a blanket statement and say that it's just an absolute non-negotiable, but it's definitely replaced the yellow pages from back in the day. Remember when you used to have yellow page ads? I remember that early in my ministry. And then, websites, sure, But
Mhm.
I find myself, if I'm traveling someplace,
Yep.
I may Google and then I may look on their social media to give me a better look at what's going on. What are your thoughts there?
I totally agree with you. I would say, yeah, saying non-negotiable makes it sound probably bigger than it is,
Yeah.
but it is very, very important. It is one of those
Mm.
aspects that I think people are going to have to recognize. And I think back to the day, when you asked me, and I'll probably hit back on this multiple times, and you'll have to forgive me. I
Mm.
believe there's some crows outside my window because there
I
is
was
a
gonna
farm
say
across the street. So
that's incredible. So this is releasing after Halloween, but
there
we're
you go.
recording this a few days before. It's very appropriate. That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, they're pecking and dough.
Yeah, that's good.
Can I can I open my window and see what's going on back here? Because this is a little different. Okay. Let's see if
Okay.
we can.
All right. Look at this.
There we go.
Whoa, they're right there.
There were two crows right there. Sorry, you can edit that out. When I say country, I mean country. So, where were we?
That's awesome.
They'll
But a
probably come
social
back.
media presence is important, right? Yeah, you were going to say we'll probably circle back to this thought.
Mhm. We'll probably circle back, but yeah, it all goes back. You mentioned our building just a minute ago, and it's a cute, quaint building, really great location and everything. But the day when you asked me to come on here, I remember responding first of all saying, I don't know why you're picking me. But then second, I even mentioned that I had gotten to post this week. The week had just been so busy. We'd had multiple deaths in the congregation.
Hmm.
And so there's going to be times where I can't emphasize enough, if we're looking at this from a preacher's standpoint, where it can't be the most important thing. And I'm sure we'll come back
Yes.
to that multiple times in here. But it is
Yeah.
important because a lot of people, for example, where we are, who are moving to the area, they're going to look at that first. It's just natural. And
Hmm.
of course, in the post-COVID era, most people have a lot of good material on their Facebooks and websites and stuff, but that Facebook's probably going to be, or that's just what it's going to be for right now, and it'll change at some point. But for now, I believe that's probably where most people are looking to get their information on a congregation.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Um, and absolutely, it's not the be all end all. And also, Facebook isn't a replacement for personal evangelism.
Oh, by
I mean,
no
just
means,
if
yeah.
we're getting the caveats out of the way,
Hmm.
it's not. We can't say that. Oh well, I posted a few sermon videos, or I made some
Hmm.
special Devo videos and floated those out there. Therefore, I have been involved in the Great Commission.
Yeah.
I view social media and really websites, podcast, any of it, anything online, as maybe trying to get a foot in the door.
Hmm.
Maybe that's some kind of initial contact, personal interaction, one on one, whether that's phone
Hmm.
call, email. I think ultimately you're going to probably be sitting down across the table from each other.
That's right. Hmm.
That's where all this is leading, and so you almost have
Hmm.
like this funneling effect, right, where social media is trying to maybe the best goal is get those people to physically show up at the church building one of these days
Hmm.
and
Get
then
get
go
those
from
people.
there.
You'll get the messages from people on social media. Also, you kind of get that through Facebook. But you're
Yeah.
right. It's kind of that first glance that people see. And so that's kind of the way I see it, is you're never going to replace your one-on-one stuff. And I hope nobody thinks, if you've got that idea, I think that's not going to work. But if you
Yeah.
have 3,000 views on a video, you can't say, well, that was actually 3,000, sit down Bible study type things. It's great. And we're always glad when we get some big numbers like that. But at the
Yeah.
same time, ultimately, and I think it comes down to those, like you said, one-on-one. If you have to do a phone call, is a secondary thing. Um, but
Hmm.
social media, it's there and it's very important, but it's never going to replace what we actually do with it. And so the way I kind of view it is, when I take care of mine, one of the big things is, and like you mentioned, Robert, I have my own personal, and then I have the churches that I see, and I also help out. I was thinking about it. I help oversee Exposure Youth Camp. I work on their
Yeah.
social account also. So if you're on their Facebook or Instagram, both of those are actually more team oriented. There's more than one of us on it because it can be a little
Hmm.
overwhelming. But you want to see it from both the people who are part of the congregation, or, exposure is an event, but part of the congregation. And then you want to see it from the people outside. And so you're trying to balance both of those at the same time and seeing what the benefit of what you're doing is for those who are inside and encouraging them, but also from the outside who are looking in for the first time, like for us moving to the area. And what are they going to see when they first look in and get that first window to our congregation?
Yeah, that's right. And social media is all about first impressions, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's good stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so those caveats sort of out of the way, when we're talking about interacting on social media, a lot of what we're going to be doing, I think, is going to be sort of kind of like marketing, right? I mean, do you think that's a fair characterization? I mean, that's kind of what we're doing and what we're going to discuss going forward. I mean, some kind of strategy or, how we do that. I mean, we're talking about marketing here. Some people avoid those terms. They're not
Mm-hmm.
really, thrilled about that idea. Comment on that. Do you think that's a fair way of describing what we're doing when we're trying to minister on social media?
Marketing is going to have a bad connotation to it because you're
Yeah.
picturing someone walking into a marketplace and there's people trying to sell them things from every direction, which is what is
Hmm.
occurring on social media. Everybody's got a loud voice and everybody's just screaming in your ears trying to convince you of things. I kind of prefer, I guess if I was picking a preferred term, I'd say it's more about visibility than it is
Yeah.
necessarily
Mm.
marketing. Visibility says, here's what we're doing. Here are our people doing things. Here are our people, we're working on something today with these bags of blessings that we give out to the community. Here's our people doing it. It's not necessarily a market necessarily, but it's both. Like I said, you're both encouraging the congregation of here's your work, kind of going in, the things you're doing in the community, and then the outsider saying, here's a group of people that don't just come and sit in a pew on Sunday. So while
Mhm.
you could use marketing there, you could also say it's a visibility in our community, letting
Mhm.
people know you're here. That's one of our big things, is just letting people know we exist out here. And a lot of people don't even know, and they just drive right past without thinking twice about it. And
Mhm.
so I don't think marketing is a bad word, to be honest. I don't think it's something we have to exclude. But you just have to kind of think of what that end game is, because our generation has been marketed to so much on social media and everywhere, but and every generation's marketed to in one form or fashion, whether that was a
Yeah.
door-to-door book salesman, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
in our case, it's social media, and we see ads,
Mhm.
and I could open up my phone right now and I could promise you I'd see a sponsored ad from a church within 10 miles of here that just opened in the past 3 weeks. That's like, oh, come, visit this church or that church for the first time. And so for me, I kind of view it more as encouragement and visibility, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
overcomplicating it just to stay away from the phrase marketing, but to me, it's less of a sales pitch. It's more of a window
Yeah.
to look in and see what's going on.
That's a good point. I've encountered some Christians who have some even a little bit of trouble with that. They'll say things like, "Well, Jesus said, don't let the left hand know what the right hand is
Hmm.
doing, and
Hmm.
don't do what you do to be seen of men," and that sort of thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's I think that doesn't mean that nobody can know that we
Hmm.
do anything, and that doesn't mean that
Hmm.
everything we do has to be done in secret, right? Jesus said,
Hmm.
"Let your light shine like a city on a hill, like a lamp on a
Hmm.
lampstand." It's
Hmm.
all about the motivation, I think, behind why we're doing what we're
Yes.
doing. And to
Hmm.
me,
Hmm.
if I go around doing good things and then I post it on my personal profile all the time, that might come across in a weird way.
Hmm.
If we do it in the name of Owens Crossroads Church of Christ, or in the name of Gold Hill Road Church of Christ, where I am here in South Carolina, to me, that's different. That's saying, look at what this group of people, and even though the general public may not think of it that way,
Hmm.
my philosophy is it's look at what the Lord is doing through us,
That's right.
and
Yes.
let's make this as much as possible be about Him and giving Him the glory rather than
That's the
ourselves. But
right
that
way to put
doesn't
it.
mean we don't share that stuff, right? We're
Hmm.
going to share it, but we're going to do it because it's about Him.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, because you've got every group in the world can do good works. The difference is, what are good works, what makes them different, and we got to make sure we show that to the community also, because we're not, you can have a football team that travels out and does what we would call mission work, but they're just a college football team doing the same thing. And so you got to
Yeah.
put that in mind when you're posting these type things. Is what's your motivation? A lot like what you said. We're not shining light to
Mhm.
ourselves. We're trying to get glory back to God. We're trying to show that this body of believers really are the hands and feet of Jesus functioning in this community. And that means that we're showing it in a way, especially the times that we're in right now, where you've got to do a lot more virtually than normal. It kind
Yeah.
of gets that out there.
Yeah. Good point. So as I am looking at the Owens Crossroads Church of Christ, and I'm just on Facebook here, right? And we'll talk about
I should have
platforms and
cleaned it
things
up
like that.
before you pulled it up, but yeah.
No, no, no. Please don't worry about that. I'm noticing that there are several consistent things
Hmm.
about this, and I've pulled up here. What I guess what is this? Would you call this a logo? Some people are
Hmm.
afraid of all these marketing kind of terms. I think
Hmm.
that's what this is. This is a visual representation that I'm sure is used quite often to
Hmm.
associate people with you guys. I think just about everybody is probably on board with this idea of having some
Hmm.
kind of, we call it branding, some kind of
Hmm.
consistent. This isn't so much messaging as it's a thing that unites your message together under your
Hmm.
banner. Eh, why is that a big deal? Why is that an important thing?
So yeah, whether it's a logo or just your congregation name on letterhead. I mean, if you want to take it back
Yeah.
to old days, take it out of social media terms and put it in terms I think we're more okay with and comfortable with. You would
Hmm.
have letterhead, and you would have your name of your congregation, your address, and some identifying thing on that. A lot of those, if we're being honest, were just some draftsman hand sketched the look of the building on at some point in
Yes.
history, and
Uh-huh.
that became a lot of letterhead, and that was great. There's nothing wrong with that. And so you see that branding idea, and if you kind of scroll through ours, it's not perfectly consistent. You're not going to see it through everything, but if you saw some of the same colors that were used on our stuff, like that's our Sunday
Hmm.
mornings right now. But if you were to kind
Hmm.
of pull in even our virtual service or some of the stuff, there's a constant theme both with feel and color for like the congregational stuff.
Hmm.
And it's kind of the darker blue, and you probably won't even find it for a while. But it's if you walked into our lobby, you'd see a banner with our classes advertised on it, and it would all have
Mm.
the same colored feel as the trifold I'll hand you if you visit. It'll have that same
Yeah.
feel to it, and it'll have that same logo on it, and so everything's kind of consistent. The reason branding is, or whatever you want to call it, but we'll call it
Right.
branding. It's important, but it's also a two-edged sword because it can bring up negative ideas. Obviously, if someone has something they already feel negatively about, you're gonna bring that in, and they're gonna fight that. But it kind of gives a level of comfort without saying it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if you look, a lot of my sermons graphics that I put up, they all have our logo in the bottom left hand corner. You can kind of look there and you can see it.
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
just it's like it's not subliminal, sounds bad, but it's just like a comforting reminder of, look, this is us. This is something we're putting out. And it's a level of comfort, and you can see just that consistency, knowing, okay, this is official. Maybe that's how you want to view it, type of a
Yeah.
thing.
Right.
And so branding with that kind of shows it. And when you look throughout
Hmm.
our building, if you were to walk through our building, you'd see, like I said, the banner that has that same cover picture of our building on it, with the same fonts, the same typefaces, with all the classes
Hmm.
listed for Sunday and Wednesdays. And then when you came through our lobby, you'd actually see our logo on the wall. It's not really, it's just kind of subtly there as you come in through the building, and you just kind
Hmm.
of see those reminders. And for the record, a lot of that was done before I ever came. The logo on the
Right.
wall, the
Right.
logo created, was all before me. But
Hmm.
it's just kind of that comfort of, what you're there for, type of a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that whether you have it on the wall or you may just have it on the bulletin or on
mhm,
the, whatever it is that you're handing out or
mhm,
signage, as you said, and that sort of that's bringing it all together. And I think people in the community, if church members of the congregation there share some of the things that you post on Facebook, for example, and that little branding is I mean, we see this everywhere, right? I mean, what the golden arches stand for, what the
mhm,
Nike swoop is, or swoosh or
mhm,
whatever. I mean, all of that. And while we're not trying to become that by any means, it's just after a while, people will associate that typeface or the
mhm,
design or all of that together. And then they'll say, oh, that's that place that's out there on that road,
mhm.
where all the crows hang out. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right. They hang out with the crows across the fields.
That's where
Yeah,
they
yeah.
are.
Yeah. So, and you think about it, we have, and a lot of churches do this now, where we have gear. I don't have it on right now, but there's a sweater. We have sweaters with our logo on it that when we're working out in the community,
Yeah.
or we're in we wear
Nice.
them all the time. But a good example of how that works outside of social media again is I had to make a visit up to Vanderbilt Children's Hospital to visit somebody earlier this week.
Yeah.
And right now, they're under real strict lockdown because of COVID and everything. And so, getting in, there's exemptions to get in, but if you get the wrong person on the wrong day, you're not going to get in. And so, what
Right.
did I do? I threw on a sweater with my logo on it, my church logo, because I wanted just that immediate connection of who I am and what I'm here for. Like, I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to take anything. I'm just here to be a minister in that situation. Or for us, we're just here to be a body of believers. Like, we're not like you said, we're not trying to sell you something like golden arches. We're just here
Mm-hmm.
to do God's will on earth. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I think a lot of what we do as far as the branding goes. And we just keep it all the way through. We try to keep it consistent
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible. Not, as you see, not every single little thing is going to be precisely the same. But when it comes to the handouts and the stuff in the lobby, it's going to be that way. But that kind of tells people that there's cohesiveness going on and some thinking ahead going on. You don't
Yeah.
accidentally have the same logo for a class banner as some of your some of your youth group stuff, and then another advertisement for something later that's going on in the year, sign up sheet. If all those look the same, it shows, you know what, they're thinking this stuff through. That's what it tells me, at least subliminally, that
Yeah.
it's not just an accident. We're not just hoping this all comes together. We're putting some thought and some effort into it.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. And frankly, it makes it a little easier, right? Once you have that
Mhm.
done, you don't have to think about, okay, how am I going to type this out? What's it going to look like every time? Just stick it
Right.
down there and it makes it way
Hmm.
easier,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is a good thing too.
Mhm.
Let's talk about graphics and things like that. I mean, it's easy enough to create some kind of, if you want to call it a logo or the branding that we mentioned a minute ago.
Mhm.
That's simple stuff. As we're scrolling through, y'all's Facebook and things like that, I'm noticing, this is nice graphics here. We got some sand in the background. We've got,
Mhm.
multicolored circles on top of each other and really fancy fonts and that sort of thing. Um, you know, uh, why is it crucial to post something in this way, or why do you choose to, as opposed to just maybe writing out a text post with your sermon preview, for example, or a
Mhm.
blurb or
Mhm.
something? What is the significance of graphics? Maybe let's start there.
Well, graphics to me bring in an immediate emotional feeling. And I'm a
Mm,
visual guy. A lot of people know I do
mm,
a lot of photography. And so whenever I take a picture, let's say, I'm trying to portray an emotion of what we're talking about. And I think a lot
uh,
of graphics have that same thing of, you're not going to hit it the nail on the head. I'll be honest, some weeks I spend more time on graphics than others. But yeah, and so there's different feelings that we're trying to go for as I go through it. And sometimes, you see that there's a little girl in there wearing a coat, and we're doing a coat drive. Of course, there's going to be even
yeah,
if you don't think about it, there's an emotional pull
sure.
to it. And let me say this, because I probably should have even begun with this. A lot of the social media stuff, I know I'm taking this conversation of, this is me and another preacher having a conversation, and other
Yes.
preachers who may need some, because there's some guys who are so good at this out there.
Hmm.
Jason Helton, Dennis Washington, Hardison Moles. Those three
Yeah.
guys have probably taught me everything I know as far as when I actually put stuff out. They're the ones who I'm listening to. My wife is really good at this stuff also. And
Yeah.
so, if nothing else, you may just need to include some people in your circle who are better at this than you are if you're really struggling with it, because they can help you think that stuff through. Like I said, Dennis, Jason, and Hardison, when I listen to them talk about social media, they are so far above me. But all I do is just soak it up like a sponge. And then I take that
Yeah.
information back and say, how can I, as a preacher who's doing this and not a full time guy who's doing this, just this
Mm,
specific job, how can I include this? And of course, our question is always going to be, without it taking up too much of our time, that we could be
yes.
using for something else.
Yeah.
And so, the graphics, though, they're important. The feeling there is important. And there's some things that are probably better than I still am working on. Like, I notice anytime I post something that has real people from our congregation, like our vacation Bible school stuff, it has real
Hmm.
pictures of real people in it, then it gets a lot of attention and a lot of traction. And those are the
Hmm.
type of things I think our generation And maybe I'm being too specific with that. Maybe it's just people, but we like to see real people. You know, it's cool to use some stock graphics, but at the same time, if you can use real people, it really starts to pick up steam and people like that. But
Hmm.
for me, the graphics, and the graphics go back, they're consistent as well. So if you were to see whatever sermon slide you pulled up, whatever graphic from Instagram or Facebook you saw, the same graphic will be up there, obviously, Sunday, because I'm not going to create a different graphic, but it'll be the same. It'll just be built for
Yeah.
that, you know, a 16:9 for our screens in our auditorium instead.
Yeah. So honestly, then with this, you could, if you want to do the kill two birds with one stone approach, you're
Mm-hmm.
making your slides, you make your title slide, and then you just adapt that title slide over across different media, and you've got it right. I mean, there's your sermon preview post, and
Mm-hmm.
you've done it all in one swoop, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And really, the key, and it's probably the nuts and bolts part, is kind of the tools to do that. Some tools
Yes.
make that easier than others, and it's going to come down to your personal preference of how comfortable you feel kind of digging in. Because some guys, you know, I remember back when I was an intern seeing guys build stuff on PowerPoint, and I thought, why would you build something like a T-shirt, let's say, on PowerPoint? I was like, why would you do it? And well, now I can tell you, it's because that's what they knew and that worked for them.
Yes.
But that's the key: find what works, what you can learn, and kind of take it from there and grow from that.
Hmm.
There's, you know, there's some really good resources for that. Canva is one, I believe, totally free. We use one called Creation Swap. So if you dig deep in our stuff and you go back over to Creation Swap, you'll start to see it. Because years ago, I used to create everything from scratch, and it took
Yeah.
so much time and so much effort that at some point I said, it's just too much. Like I want to do it, but it was just too much for me. And so I started to find what worked best for me. And so there's lots of kind of graphic websites that can help you out. So yeah, Creation Swap's the one I use. I know our youth minister uses Canva a lot for his stuff.
Hmm.
But they have free options on stuff. I'd forgotten that we use the paid option, which is good. I think it's, you know, a couple $100 a year for that. But the way I see it is it
Hmm.
saves me so much time that it's very much worth our subscription. And then a lot of it for me, I pull back into Photoshop if I want to really make adjustments to it.
Yeah. Right. Now, and you mentioned a minute ago, right? You're a photographer. You're deep into that, and
Mhm,
so you're going to have some of these tools. Photoshop, for example, something like $20 a month on a
mhm,
subscription through Adobe, and
mhm,
and it is sophisticated software. I mean, it's pro level software.
mhm,
But as you say, Canva, build it in PowerPoint or Keynote. I
mhm.
mean, it's
I
just
think
amazing what a lot of these places can do.
Is it Adobe Spark, I believe, and Adobe Rush? I think there's two different ones. One's for video, and I
Yeah.
think maybe that's Rush, and Adobe Spark. I think that's either free or just very minimal. And a lot of those are just meant for you to just dive right into. And I think it
Yeah.
is Spark the more I think about it. But they'll have the same type of setup where you can pull some graphics and kind of
Hmm.
build things and have kind of ideas already in place. So you're not spending 4 hours creating a sermon graphic. And then kind of like you
Right.
said, we're just gonna, once I get my thing set for Sunday, my whole Sunday series, let's say, I'm not recreating the wheel every week. I'm just basing it off that, and that saves a whole lot of time.
We've had conversations on Preachers in Training before about copyright. That's something
Hmm.
you need to think about when you're live streaming. That's something you need to think about with PowerPoint slides.
Hmm.
It's something you need to think about when you're doing social media too.
Hmm.
Places like Creation Swap. I mean, can we trust those places? You used a term a minute ago, stock images, and that's what we're
Hmm.
talking about, right? Images you
Hmm.
download from the internet, and you're looking for royalty free,
That's right.
or
Hmm.
in the case like with Creation Swap, or some people use Igniter Media or Share Faith and those
Yeah, I've
kind of
used
things
that in
as
the past
well.
too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And your payment for that subscription in part is also giving you licensing so that you can share those in other places. So read the fine print, make sure that you're in good place there. You want to comment? I mean, neither one of us are copyright lawyers by any means, but it's something we want to keep in mind, right?
Yeah, a lot of people would say, if I'm not making money off of it, then it's okay to break copyright, but it's still not. It
Yes,
doesn't matter if you're
that's
making
right.
money or not. And you can go deep with that from anything. If it doesn't matter, just because you're not making money, a lot of times we give ourselves a free pass. But you make a
Yeah.
valid point. Creation Swap, all of those, you get these images where it's okay to use. It kind of gets down to like your CCLI. It's the same type thing. We all
Yeah.
have that. It's part of the world. Some artists somewhere created that, and they really would prefer you not just steal the idea, whether you're making money or not. But a lot of those places, like on Google Images, you can kind of search by royalty free or
Yeah.
different specifications on it. And I've got some guys who you always see like a citation, a really good like of where they got it from, who do a much better job than I do a lot. But you really need to make sure you're not just yanking somebody else's work and presenting it as your own, or even just yanking it when it's very clearly they don't want that stolen. A lot of people
Yeah.
really want their
Yeah.
stuff. They spent their hard-earned time and money to create it, and they want to keep it that way.
And the last thing you want to do is to put a target on the church's back,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
maybe there's an artist who is against the Lord's church, or really not a
Right.
very religious
Mm-hmm.
person at all, and you don't want to give them a reason to come at you for anything
Yeah.
either.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about the kinds of posts that we want to make. I mean, give us some examples. I mean, we've mentioned already sermon promos and that sort of thing. Um, uh, what kinds of posts are you interested in posting on the Owens Crossroads, church page, that will encourage the Christians there, and then maybe reach out to the community in some way?
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. And maybe you have to think that through a little bit as you're making the post of, am I making this for somebody outside the congregation looking in, or am I making this from somebody already inside, kind of edifying and
Mm,
encouraging someone who's inside? So you'll see, and I'll say all this with the caveat is, I'm not as good as I want to be with all this. But I like
mhm,
kind of the sermon preview stuff. You can see that on ours. I like to do that
mhm,
over the weekend because I like to give people just a reminder. Hey, we're here. Hey, this is what we're doing this week, just so you kind of know what's coming up. Yeah, on our Sunday mornings, you
mhm.
know what's coming up Sunday night. You may know classes coming up. So you've got your also your informational post, which would be like a list of the classes for the quarter.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of different posts like that you can make. But then on the other side, you can, and we've kind of backed off, but back when it was heavy virtual service season, we would make sure that link was up there because we wanted it to be really easy to
Yes.
access, so for people to get to. And then if we have an event, we may want to post our vacation Bible school. We have videos on there of it showing what happened and how that went, and kind of just again encouraging plus helping people see what went on there. You can click on those, and each of those have decently put together videos of what we had and
Mhm.
who was there, and just seeing, again, kind of seeing people. Of course, you always want to be careful with people. There's kind of a trade-off there because people are, not everyone necessarily wants their face on stuff, and so you want to be obviously careful with that. But at the
Right.
same time, it just kind of shows that you're a real group of people doing real stuff. And so I like the sermon stuff. I like the showing when we do something. We had an incident a couple of weeks ago of a family that moved away, and we just we couldn't have a party. We couldn't do anything we wanted to do for them. A real integral part of this congregation, who just for some family stuff had to move away. And so, we kind of took a step back from what we normally would do. And I made a post on there with them and a gift we gave them, because I wanted everyone to see, hey, look, here's, we were there, even though you couldn't see them in person and you couldn't be there. And we all wanted to be there for this family, that at least they were
Mhm.
able to see it and kind of get a feeling for what they did, and then kind of how the family accepted it and stuff. And so you want to
Yeah.
also show, you've got advertisements. I would put it that way. If you have events coming up, it's your
Mhm.
your vacation Bible schools. If you're doing gospel meetings, you want to show that. Yeah, it's our summer series type post, and it's all kind of it's all in there. You can't rely on it by any means as the only means of communication. But
Right.
again, if you came in, you saw the sermon slides for those guys, they would each have that same look, that same feel. Everything would kind of be kind of cohesive, graphically speaking.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's helpful not just for guests, but for the general membership too, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's we all know where we are. I mean, that way we don't get lost between Sunday morning and Wednesday nights, or
Hmm.
whatever. We sort of, that snaps us back into a context of thought that'll help us
Hmm.
go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and yeah, go ahead.
I would say from a preacher's standpoint, if you're sitting in the preacher's chair right now and you're thinking of it, if you can post Friday morning, we actually schedule our post for our sermon series. A lot of I schedule
Yeah.
out, when I get it done, I schedule it so I don't have to worry about it throughout the rest of the week. Which, if you don't know, guys, you can do that on Facebook super easy. You can
Yeah.
schedule a post and say, hey, I'm not going to be here, but I'd rather let me post it at this time, and it'll send it out for you. But
Yeah.
if I'm a preacher, let's say, it shows if the post goes out Thursday night or Friday morning, it shows I didn't create that sermon Saturday night either. You know, it didn't just come off the top of
Right.
my head. It
Yeah.
shows there was some thought, some thinking ahead that occurred there. Like some of your other videos with other guys, it kind of shows I'm not just preaching to myself. What is it, Adam Fawn, who said, you know, it shows I'm not just throwing this together at the last minute and thinking about
That's
myself.
right.
It shows, look, I'm
Yes.
thinking of you guys as I prepare all this. I'm getting it ready to present to you. So get ready.
Yeah. Good point. And I find that the members like to know. I mean, Christians
Mm-hmm.
like to know what the sermon's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them will read ahead if there's a text that's a part
That's
of
right.
that and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
which is really good too. Hey, just so people know, I'm on the Light Networks Facebook page. I'm happen to be an administrator of that, right? And when you click create post, you can write whatever you want, and then there's a way to schedule that
Yeah,
down
if you go
in
down to
down in the
publishing
bottom
tools, there
there.
you go. Yep,
Yeah,
that's how you'll get into it,
exactly.
and
You go
it'll
in
walk
there.
you through.
We schedule. You can schedule all kinds of posts, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
schedule videos, graphics. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
text is the same way. It's all right there, which is great.
That's right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and
To
there
me,
are
I love it because
services. Yeah,
it's just too
there are
easy to forget.
services. Yeah, that's right. There are services like Buffer, for example,
Mm-hmm.
which is free up to 3 social media accounts. If you got Facebook and Instagram and Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
there you go, right?
Yeah.
And that'll help too. So yeah, I'm a big fan of scheduling it out as well. I think that's a good thing to do. And that
Mm-hmm.
way too, you can batch these things, right? So you're like,
Oh yeah.
I'd like to be more consistent with this. And by the way, I'd like to be more consistent and be able to do what I'm about to suggest. But that way, you go back a month, and then schedule posts for a month ahead, and then you don't have to think
Mm-hmm.
about it for another month, and that's really nice too. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of that.
Uh, yeah, absolutely. How about where do you put your focus when we're talking about social media? We've been sort of Facebook heavy. There's
Mm-hmm.
probably a reason for that, but where are you focusing when you're talking about social media ministry?
You know, I was thinking back to my days of youth ministry, and
Yeah,
all the different types of social medias that we've had, you know, from Twitter to Periscope, you know, Instagram, and some of the other options that are out there. Even if you want to get into, you know, Snapchat's out there, and a lot of churches do Snapchat, and you just keep going because they're always going to grow every year. You're going to have another platform as things continue to develop. And yeah, we've kind of been Facebook heavy because I really think you could just run yourself in circles trying to keep up with it, and there's probably some value in
yes,
that, trying to keep up, but at the same time you could lose so much time and effort just trying to always be whatever the next thing is, and before you know it, you've got a Periscope account and nobody uses Periscope by the time you figure it out. And
yeah,
so we are mainly, because I kind of looked at where our people are, we're mainly Facebook and Instagram. And now that they're, you know, kind of overseen by the same parent company, it's easy to kind of connect those two,
hmm,
but it's just where our people happen to be. And so you can go
yeah,
through and, you know, as long as I'm paying attention when I set up my posts, they should go to both. But sometimes I get distracted, obviously, and things happen, and we don't get them all lined up exactly the same. But
yeah,
it's those two are probably where most of our people spend their time, and so that's where I'm going to spend most of my time also, because they're just kind of, like it or not, Facebook is kind of the foundation of social media at this point. And so we're just going to we're going to live in that foundation. And Instagram's still heavier on people. You know, you can look at the demographics on who's there.
hmm,
But like, you know, personally, I had to make a decision as a youth minister. I'm not going to get on Snapchat. You know, I'm not going to get on TikTok.
right,
I'm not going to do that. You know, you could, and there's nothing wrong with the guys who do. They're probably
right,
doing better than me with all this. But it's just, to me, there became a limit. And I think that's probably the biggest advice I continue to preach to these guys is, you know, if you're doing this yourself, if you don't have a Jason Helton who's rocking it out in the office next to you, if you're by yourself and you're creating your graphics and you're having to do it all like we are, then make sure you're just being as effective as you can with the time. It's time
yeah,
management, like everything else we do.
yeah, that's right. I find that while a lot of students like have to have Facebook for this and that,
Mm-hmm.
most of the youth group members of the congregation here are going to be more active on Instagram than they are on Facebook.
Yeah, yeah.
But that doesn't change the fact that, broad brush here, virtually everyone has a Facebook account. And I think we're going to reach the broadest group of people on Facebook. If you can only do one, prioritize Facebook, I would say. But you're right, because Facebook or whatever, I think actually as we're recording this, Facebook has released whatever their parent company name is, which I haven't seen yet.
Here we go. I can't wait to
But
see it.
yeah, there we go. We'll all bated breath. But anyway, note the sarcasm. But Facebook or its parent company owns Instagram. And you can actually link your Facebook page and your Instagram account so that you can cross both from either direction, I think, right? And that's a helpful thing. So yeah. Good times.
That's big.
In a perfect world, Paddy Flanagan, and when you are, when you're on your A game in social media, how many times a week, what's the variety of posts? I mean, what kind of social media presence does the church at Owens Crossroads have when you're firing on all cylinders and you're able to perfectly balance sermon prep and visiting and ministry and social media all at the same time?
There are those seasons where there's a lot going on, but you're able to get it as you want. I really like for people to know what's coming, and maybe because I'm kind of a guy who likes to think ahead, and that's why I like to have the sermon kind of preview type stuff. I like to include in some of that sermon kind of series previews, which I haven't done since COVID because it's just been so nuts since it. But I used to do before, kind of like a little 1 minute, preview of what we're going to be studying and why that's important. And you could have that. But, I would love to have pictures of people in classes. I'd love to have all that, but it's different. It's going to be different now than it probably would have been 2 years ago, because there's just not going to be the huge amount of human interaction that we used to have. We still have human interaction. I hope you are. And if not, I'm really sorry, but there's still all that human interaction. I would love to have pictures of, people in classes. I'd love to have all that and just kind of balance it out. So in a perfect world, man, I'd have a picture of everybody, we impacted in that community. Every time we did something good for someone, I'd love to have that out there. Anytime we met together, whether that was an official gathering or an unofficial gathering or a youth group gathering or a ladies class, I'd love to have all that included in it. And so the balance, just to me, it just becomes the balance. It's not necessarily the last thing I think about, but it's one of the last, to be honest, that I think about every week is how to get it out there. I want it to be there, so it's on that to-do list, and it's going to get done unless, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, things just go completely crazy in a week. It's going to get done. But the key is going to be, you've got to have stuff going on if you're going to be posting stuff. And if you don't have anything going on, it's going to be difficult to kind of present that. And so that's going to kind of ebb and flow with what your congregation's doing at the time. Even with COVID never came to be, it's still that same thing. It's going to ebb and flow. And if I can, I was thinking through probably one of a point of impact that really hit me is something that Dale Jenkins told us when he came and spoke here a couple of years ago. He came into our building and he said, y'all have a beautiful building, love the location, love the building. And then he said something that really stuck with me, and I've used it every time I get the chance. I'm gonna give him credit. It was Dale Jenkins, but he said, don't let your building be the most beautiful part of your congregation. So think about that. A lot of people, and y'all have a beautiful building, and there's nothing wrong with having a good looking building, and we have a good looking modern building. But he said, don't let that be your focus. Don't let that be the only thing. Like, don't let that be your thing, that you have a good building. And if I could, say one thing, don't let your social media be the only beautiful thing about your congregation. Don't let it be the only active thing about your congregation. Make sure that everything else, that you're not putting up one thing when reality looks nothing like it. Because let's be honest, that's social media. So many people, they make everything look perfect when it's not. And so make sure your social media is not the most active thing of your congregation, not the most beautiful part. Make sure the people and what you're doing there is the most beautiful part of your congregation.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Hey, as we prepare to wind down here in just a moment, I got one more question I want to ask you about how you're taking pictures and that kind of thing, and you're a photographer, but anyway, I think there are simpler approaches for those of us who are a little less initiated behind a fancy lens and a big
Yeah.
camera body. But first, let me remind those of you who are watching or listening that Preachers in Training is a part of the Light Network, a network of podcasts designed to encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. TheLightNetwork.tv is the website where you can find not only episode archives of Preachers in Training, but all the other podcasts that release on a regular basis from the network. As you know, we do Preachers in Training in both audio and video forms. And so if you're interested, subscribe in your podcast app, not so you don't miss the audio versions, or on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, and if you want to click that little bell and change the subscription so you're notified, hey, that just means you don't miss an episode. Brand new episodes of Preachers in Training release on Thursdays from those podcast and video outlets, as well as on our website, thelightnetwork.tv. I'd love to hear from you if you've got questions, comments, future episode ideas. Preachers at thelightnetwork.tv is the way that you can do that. We also have a Facebook group. On Facebook, just search for Preachers in Training. It's a closed group. We do that to keep the conversation focused on preaching and ministry, but we'd love to hear from you. We'd love for you to be a part of that. Just search for Preachers in Training on Facebook, ask to be a part of that group, and we'd love to welcome you in there. Again, Thursdays, new episodes for Preachers in Training. Look forward to that. I know I do every single week. And as we get nearer to the end of the year, we have some of our annual episodes coming up. We always have a special Thanksgiving emphasis episode on Thanksgiving week, which for us is Thanksgiving Day, because Preachers in Training comes out on Thursdays. And we also have a holiday gift guide episode each year with Chad Landman, and he's already prepared to come back on here, I think actually next week on the next episode, to discuss that with us. And so I always look forward to that too. Chad's tips and tricks and techie gadgets and all of that kind of stuff. Paddy Flanagan is joining us today, though, as we've been talking about ministering on social media for this season 14, episode 13 of Preachers in Training. And brother, I appreciate the candor, your willingness to sort of let us peek behind the curtain and see how you do what you do. And I appreciate you saying too, I think it's really valuable for all of us to realize you can't do everything all the time. There's there's one of us, and we just have to prioritize, triage, whatever you want to say, and do the very best that we can do. And I think that is probably the number one takeaway that we need to glean from this episode. That and what you said right before I went to the break, when you said, don't present yourself as something other than what you actually are. And then make sure that what you want to present yourself as is what is in keeping with what the Lord wants it to be. But tell us, though, in the waning moments here, you are a photographer. I've noticed that some of the pictures and things that are on Owens Crossroads, Facebook, and Instagram and things, they're very well done. You got depth of field, you got the focus things going on, you got the nice sunsets and the colors and all of that.
Right.
All right. I don't have a fancy camera. I'm not, I can't tell you an f-stop from a, I don't know, shortstop. Okay. I don't know. It's all the same to me. So, talk to us about what if you're this kind of person, and hey, we've got events going on. I'm a preacher. I want to post pictures and stuff. What should I do? Should I, in other words, should I say, well, because I don't have this $1,000 piece of equipment, or because I don't have this knowledge, I'm just going to throw in my hands and not do it at all? What do you say to that?
So that's probably the most asked question I get, because people see our stuff and they see the stuff that I've worked on, and the photos and the videos and stuff, and they have a lot of questions. And there's two ways to really approach this. You can either say, okay, if you're by yourself and you're the guy who's got to do it, then just use whatever tools you have. If you have a cell phone, just learn how to use that cell phone. And maybe if you really want to take pictures, and you're gonna have to put a little effort into it, I guess, you're gonna have to maybe even take a course on composition, which I know that sounds just crazy, but there's a million YouTube videos on how to take decent pictures. And so, there's one I think that says it'll teach you 80% of photography in 10 minutes. We'll spend 10 minutes of your life and see if that's worth it, and kind of go from there, because there's cell phones are really good these days. I mean, they're really good. They're good enough, especially for what we. And so that'd be my first thing, is just use whatever tools you happen to have. And what part of that though is saying, hey, I may not be the best person for this job. I've got to include somebody else. And so there are times where we have to rely on other people. And so our vacation
Mm-hmm.
Bible school would be a good case study of this. We had a gentleman who's really good at photography who he took all the photos of during the event. I don't even know if those made it to our social media or not, but we asked him, hey, can you, his name's Bob, can you go around and you just take pictures of the event? And Bob,
Nice.
he's like a grandparent. He wasn't burdened with anything else. He didn't have kids there. He didn't have to worry about anything except taking pictures. And so we've
Mm-hmm.
got that. One of our secretaries is really good at taking photos also. And so when we have events and maybe I'm tied up, as I like to call it, shaking hands and kissing babies, she's taking pictures of stuff and then passing them kind of along for us to use. And then,
Mm-hmm.
kind of spacing out. And so like with Vacation Bible School, the reason I use it is I did the video on that. And then we
Yeah.
had Bob do the photo on that because it was just too big a job. If you're the minister in charge of an event or thing, you just don't, if you want to be invested in what you're doing, so sometimes you need to pull other people in and have
That's
them do
right.
it for you. So don't be too proud to say, hey, you know what, there's a girl who takes a lot of selfies, or maybe not selfies, but there's somebody at church who takes a lot of pictures. They take decent pictures with their phone. Just ask them even, and you may get some
Yeah.
good stuff. You may not, but what's it going to hurt if you at least bring in some help? But really, the tools you have, because even pre-COVID, people would call up and ask about cameras and equipment and how much should I spend on it and what should I look for and what do you the key is you could spend thousands of dollars on the right equipment, but if you don't know how to use it, it's not going to matter.
Right.
And
That's right.
you could hand someone a $7,000 8K camera, but if they don't know how to edit the video or anything, it's not going to matter. Whereas if you give someone a real basic camera but a lot of knowledge with that, you can do it. So it may take a little bit of knowledge kind of to turn it. It seems like everyone's first camera is a Canon Rebel. Well, you could probably do a lot with a Canon Rebel
Yeah.
and until you realize how pushed you have to be for that. Because really the equipment we use here, and especially during our virtual services, we were unique in that we pre-recorded those.
Mm-hmm.
But the equipment we used for that was just all my personal equipment that we happened to have on hand. It wasn't that expensive. It wasn't that
Yeah.
fancy. It was just learning how to use it in that environment. And I mean, your office, you probably got, a key light and stuff in there to help make it work. It's just learning how to use what you have. And so don't stress out.
Right.
Don't go out and buy the nicest, camera or anything. Just use what you have. Well, and if you need to get something, I'll say this: if you're like, no, I don't have anything, and I don't want to use my phone, I've got to use something else, whatever. Give me a call, send me a Facebook message, and I'll be happy to walk you through what I do. And because my thing is, all my equipment is my own, and I'm not going to make the church pay for that, and so we're just going to use
Mm-hmm.
it to the best of its ability. But I guess I'll kind of to wrap that up, either ask somebody who has the knowledge or find a way to get that knowledge yourself. And you
Yes.
may find a happy medium. And that probably goes with all this, with all the social media. You may just need to ask someone if you're just way overwhelmed with it and you feel that it's important and it's lacking in your congregation. You may just need to ask for help. Don't be too proud.
Yeah. That's right. Absolutely. By the way, I was looking. I knew there was a picture somewhere out there
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah, yeah.
some of your a little behind the scenes setup stuff there. I found this on the Owens
There you go.
Crossroads
Yeah, that's that. The
thing there.
local, the people who provide the internet to the building. It was an article they wrote on our virtual services because we had so many hits coming into those, so they wanted
Yeah.
to write on it because they're the ones who give us the internet, obviously. And so
Right.
yeah, that just as an example, that setup is not expensive. If you had to
Yeah.
buy the stuff, it's a f50 or excuse me an f1.8 50mm lens on a it looks like it's on my Sony A6000. So it's, you might spend $500 on that camera, but that's it. That's
Mhm.
a $500 camera. It's not like
Yes.
bukus of stuff, and a $20 umbrella with a light that's not even meant to be behind it type stuff. So it's just learning how to use your tools, So that whole setup, what,
That's right.
$520, including a tripod, and which,
Yeah.
maybe more than you were willing to spend yourself. But if you were trying to get into it as a church, or
Mhm.
especially during COVID when everyone was having to do stuff, it's not too much of a price to pay to get in.
Yes. And to the point you made a minute ago, spending a bunch of money is not going to make up for a lack of knowledge on how to use that equipment.
That's right. That's
So,
right. Yeah,
and
yeah.
the more expensive you get, usually the more complicated that equipment becomes. So,
Yes. But yeah,
just
you
know
can,
those.
I mean, you think about it, you can create almost anything on your phone. You can take decent
Yes.
pictures on your phone. Everyone's got one, probably.
You'll
Gary
be
Bradley does
extremely
not have a
surprised.
smartphone, but yeah,
Yeah,
everybody else other than Gary Bradley
that's right.
has a smartphone. So you can create stuff.
Yeah,
You can do it on there. You really can. You could probably do you if you're starting from nothing, just use your phone. I'd
yeah,
recommend that to most parents and everybody this day, by the way. Just use your phone for photography.
yeah, that's right. Good stuff. All right, we had to bring the photography thing in here. I could not conclude this episode until we had something like that. So I appreciate
Mhm.
that. Brother, we appreciate you. Thanks for, giving us some insights and some encouragement about all of this. And you've given us a lot of food for thought. We can take that and try and encourage those with whom we worship and with whom we serve the Lord. And then also try and help reach other people for the Lord
That's right.
through social media. And what a wonderful opportunity. What a time to be alive, as we say. It's a neat opportunity.
Well,
Yeah,
it's meeting the people where they are. It's what it
that's
is.
right.
It's like Paul
That's
the
it.
Areopagus. You're going to meet the people where they are, where they're spending time to see us. It's just a virtual world now, and so be sure. And I guess one more tip, if I can give one more tip, nut and bolt that I meant to
Sure.
bring up earlier is,
Yeah.
you can boost stuff on Facebook, and I don't know if
Oh,
y'all have
yeah.
done that yourselves. You can boost it if you've got something you really, really, really want to get out there. You can
Yeah.
spend a little bit of money to kind of you draw a circle and say, I want it to hit this area and I want to reach this
Mhm.
certain demographic. You can get really fancy with it. But if you could just convince real people to share a post, it'll get so much more traction than a boosted post.
Yeah.
And we've actually tested it to see. We've boosted some stuff, and then we said, hey, we're just going to post something and encourage everyone from church to share it and see what happens. And the shared stuff from a real person, a real thing, gets so much more traction. So I don't recommend, unless you need it for a very specific purpose, to boost a post. Share
Mhm.
it with real people, and you will see a lot more benefit from that post.
Great. Yeah. So just ask people to share the stuff. That's great.
Yeah.
And really you're providing a resource, I think, in creating these graphics and things. You're giving people a good conversation starter for
Mm-hmm.
personal evangelism by doing
That's
that,
right.
which is a really
Mm-hmm.
good thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, brother. We appreciate it as always and are grateful for your time today. It means a lot.
Well, thank you. We want to let our light shine wherever we are, and that includes on social media. So we got to do
Yeah.
that.
Wonderful thoughts. And we want to thank you for watching or listening to this episode of Preachers in Training. Hope you'll join us next Thursday. But until then, I'm Robert Hatfield. Let's go preach the word.